Okay, so quick review of our angle relationships. That seemed to be a big issue. Okay, so I just made up this diagram. Instead of having the letters, I chose to number them all. So just pay attention to the numbers here. So there's a lot of different angles here, a lot of different relationships that you could notice. For linear pair angles, those are the angles that form a straight line. Now it means it's only two angles that would together would equal 180 degrees. So you'd be looking for something like, well, I'll go over here to like a tic-tac-toe board. Like this angle and angle 1 and angle 2. Together, they make that straight line, which would be a total of 180 degrees. So that's what a linear pair is. So in this diagram, we've got 6 and 7. 6 angle 7. We have angles 1 and 3 as well. And then that would be it. These three angles together would be also a straight line, but we're only looking for a linear pair. So we're only looking for two that would make the line. So it would be these two and these two. Vertical angles. Those occur when you have two lines that intersect at a point. The angles formed, the four angles formed, would be two pairs of vertical angles. So angles 1 and 2 would be vertical, and angles 3 and 4. So don't think that just being like, because they're vertical angles, that they have to be top to bottom, like, you know, up and down, like you think of a vertical. They could be side to side like this, but it's almost like if you had two, I don't know, inequality symbols. Those are the vertical angles. So that's where those come from. Okay. So vertical angles in the diagram, we have one pair of those, and those would be 2 and 3. We have two straight lines here that intersected at this point, which created those vertical angles. So that'd be angle 2 and 3. I know up here we had two pairs, and the reason why there's not two pairs here is because the angle that would be vertical to angle 1, which would be this total angle, is actually split into two angles. So you can't have a vertical pair that involves three angles. So those would not be considered vertical angles, but these would be. Adjacent angles, those are next door neighbors basically. So they are side by side, they share a ray. Some linear pairs will be adjacent. Actually, all linear pairs are also adjacent, but not all adjacent angles are linear pairs. So 6 and 7, those are adjacent because they are right next door. They have this ray right here that they both share. This ray is part of angle 7, and it's also part of angle 6. So they have that ray in common. 2 and 4 are adjacent angles. They have this ray right here that cuts them into two pieces. So you got angle 2 and angle 4. We have angles 4 and 5. We have angles 5 and 3. These might not have a special relationship as far as their measure goes, unless they are a linear pair, and then in that case they are supplementary. 1 and 3. And then we have angles 1 and 2. I think that's the only pair I left out. So those are all of your adjacent angles from the diagram. Then we have those that could be adjacent and linear. So if you had listed them all out like this, it would be the ones that were present in both. So we have angles 1 and 3 and 6 and 7. So angle 6 and 7, together they form a straight line, and they are adjacent as well. If they are adjacent and linear, they're going to be supplementary, which means they're going to add up to be 180 degrees. We also had 1 and 3 that were both adjacent and linear. Hopefully that helps a little bit. The other thing that you might see in a diagram, let me see here. These two angles, we'll say angles 1 and 2. If you were asked about their relationship, they are adjacent. However, they are also complementary because they would both add up to be 90 degrees, and you know that by the square that's in the corner. So if you see that on the quiz, just know that those would be complementary, and the ones that are supplementary are the ones that would add up to 180. I'll show you one more. So for this diagram, we have 20 different angles shown. So for your vertical angles, you have, I'm not going to list them this time, but I'll just point to them. For vertical angles, you have 10 and 7. You have 2 and 9, 1 and 8. So all those that would be diagonally across from each other with those straight lines forming those angles, those would be vertical. So for an intersection like this, you actually have 3 pairs of vertical angles. You have 15 and 18, 20 and 17, 19 and 16. Don't forget, vertical angles are congruent. They are always congruent if they're vertical. Adjacent angles, we would have any angles that are sequential or consecutive would be adjacent. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So angles 13 and 14, 14 and 11, 11 and 12. Those are adjacent because they are right next door to each other. They share that ray that makes those two angles. Okay. Linear pairs. Again, any of them that form a straight line, any two angles that together form a straight line would be considered a linear pair. They will also be adjacent. So 4 and 5 would be adjacent. They also are linear because they form that straight line there. 6 and 3, you could do 4 and 6, 5 and 3. There's just a lot of possibilities there. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit.